Disempowered relationships are toxic, and they are genuinely it is an epidemic. Abusive romantic relationship, boss situation, coworker, friend. And so if you're not going to push those values, even if it means risking everything, even if the company had crashed, I would have been able to sleep at night because we had done the right thing.
If you tuned into my review of the first episode of Meghan's new podcast, then you would know that I did not buy Whitney Wolfe Herd's story. I signed off by saying that nepotism, according to my research and gut instincts, was the likely reason behind the disturbing lack of detail surrounding Whitney Herd's alleged climb to the top of Mount Everest. And after doing a lot more digging that Wednesday night and Thursday, it turns out that I wasn't too far off the mark. All of this started when I stumbled upon a Forbes article that was released in 2019 titled Exclusive Investigation: Sex, Drugs, Misogyny, and Sleaze at the HQ of Bumble's owner. The article covers 51-year-old Andre Andreev, who is the man or the investor, the unnamed investor, mentioned by Whitney during her interview with Meghan.
Long story short, couldn't find any funding, randomly got contacted by my former business partner and investor.
I find it very interesting now, knowing what I know about Andre Andreev and what you are about to learn, that Whitney failed to mention him by name, seeing as she described him as a close family member, a best friend at one point. It turns out that Andre Andreev is, apart from being the man behind Bumble, is also, as the title of this expose indicates, a man with some serious dark allegations hovering over his head. Allegations which appear to be in direct contradiction with everything that Whitney publicly stands for. Since Meghan failed to elicit any information out of her guest as to how she became the youngest female self-made billionaire in 2021, let's do her work for her and find out for ourselves, shall we? Andre Andreev is described as a dating website tycoon. Just to get a taste of the kind of character he is, he claims that he built a crude ham radio when he was only 12 years old that enabled him to have conversations with strangers around the world. His first conversation during the Cold War was with someone in the US. Quote, "The guy on the other line said, 'I'm from New York,' and I could not believe it. I thought, you're joking." Yeah, and Meghan Markle's the Queen of England. After dropping out of university at 18, he started to make a name for himself by setting up startups and selling them off. Eventually, he caught the eye of a Russian investment firm called Feminist Holdings, and they had bought a company that he made in 2002 called Begun for a few million, making him a millionaire. This relationship with Feminist Holdings continued, which is how Andreev started accumulating the bulk of his wealth. In 2004, noticing a gap in the online dating market, specifically in his country of Russia, he launched a dating website specifically for Russian users called Mamba. Feminist Holdings swooped in again and invested $20 million into the company for a 90% stake before Andreev just sold the rest of the company to them for an undisclosed sum. Which brings us to 2006, when Andreev set up Badoo, which was the company behind Bumble. And then, as we heard from Whitney, in 2014, when she had left Tinder, Andre had reached out to her upon hearing of the news and pitched the idea of a dating website. Now, Whitney says she wanted to start up Merci, if you remember.
He kind of said, listen, I'm all for whatever this is because I can feel your passion, but my one prerequisite is that you got to figure out how to do it in dating.
Now, whether it's because of Meghan's appalling interview capabilities or because Whitney would have never divulged the truth, even though it's out there on the internet, they never really elaborated that Bumble was, at least according to Forbes, quote, as much Andreev's baby as Wolfe Herd's. It was Andreev who reached out to Wolfe Herd shortly after the lawsuit, suggesting they collaborate. It was Andreev, Wolfe Herd underscores, who pushed for a woman-driven dating app rather than the social network Wolfe Herd initially proposed, because on Bumble, women make the first move.
And I was like, I have it. I was like, this is what we're building a women's first dating app. The dynamic switches because only women can message first.
It was Andreev who put up the money, becoming majority owner, and it was Andreev who leveraged Badoo completely so that Bumble could launch into the market with force. Now, it's important to understand that Badoo already by 2014 was one of the biggest dating platforms on the internet. And it's actually still successful even in recent times. Recent statistics state that Badoo generated $205 million in 2024, and that it is one of the most used dating apps in the world with 45 million users. Its success has been pretty stable, improving drastically since 2020. And while it doesn't have as large of a market share as Bumble and surprise, surprise, Tinder, the ultimate competitor, and how this all started, it still has quite a sizable chunk of it. So now we learn that the supposed founder of Bumble, the youngest self-made female billionaire, is apparently just a pretty face. In fact, in an interview that Whitney had given Forbes in 2017, she actually confesses to this and says, I don't think I could have stomached a bunch of men judging me at the time. I could have done a friends and family raise and gotten the money. This was more about his knowledge and infrastructure. Now, I don't know if Whitney goes around pretending that she's the only one who founded the company, but that was certainly the impression that I got as I listened to Meghan's podcast with her.
The person that I knew was perfect to talk to about this, that had to lead the season. Well, she's one of my closest friends. She's the founder of the dating app Bumble. It's Whitney Wolfe.
And it's really rich to start off an entire series titled Confessions of a Female Founder with a guest who didn't really establish anything. Bumble's headquarters, if you Google it, and as far as reporters are concerned, is Austin, Texas. It's all pretty and happy and yellow and bright. But as Forbes puts it, the infrastructure, the company's engine, sits squarely in the London office, which hosts product development and engineering. Whereas Bumble, at least up until 2019, before Andreev stepped down and sold his majority stake, was primarily focused on marketing, which seems to be Whitney's métier because she was the vice president of marketing at Tinder. But all the heavy lifting, everything that makes an online dating website and app work, had nothing to do with Bumble itself. How did this woman become a self-made billionaire in the span of a few years? It looks like we found our answer. Get yourself a multimillionaire or billionaire investor to do all the hard work for you.
Our Northern Star is how do we end misogyny?
So we've established that the reason for the complete lack of detail, the complete lack of insight, the complete lack of confessions from Whitney about her climb to the top was because she wasn't responsible for her success. Now, let's focus on the darker side of things, the things that may point at Whitney being, at best, a simpleton, and at worst, a ruthless hypocrite. Let me set the scene. From what little we heard in the podcast, I gathered that Whitney loves to portray herself, much like Meghan, as a feminist icon, a hero, a warrior of women's rights.
Bumble has always been about solving a problem, creating a solution to something I felt like myself and every woman I knew was dealing with.
In May of 2019, Whitney had written a piece for the New York Times titled, Like a Boss, Whitney Wolfe Heard's Work Diary, Fighting Misogyny, One Bumble Brand at a Time. And this piece was written like a journal entry for 5 or 6 days, from Monday to Saturday. It starts off with an entry put in at 1:30 p.m. on a Monday.
I arrive at the Texas Capitol building to testify in support of Bill 2789, which would criminalize sending unsolicited lewd photos in the same way that indecent exposure in public is a crime.
All right, pretty strong start to the week. What have we got next? Tuesday, 5:30 a.m.
I call Andre Andreev, my founding partner and Bumble's majority owner. He's based in London and oversees our tech and product teams. We're incredibly in sync and talk 2 to 5 times a day.
And the title would have had you think that there was a lot more to do with fighting misogyny and fighting for the rights of women, but the rest of it literally reads like a teenager's journal. And not just any teen, but a teen who loves to name drop. Tuesday, 11:30 a.m.
Call with Rachel Zoe, the fashion designer and businesswoman, from a parking lot.
Wednesday, 8:30 a.m.
Today we're working on our coming Women's Investment Summit. Serena Williams and I will be selecting the companies that participate.
I guess now we know how Meghan got her introduction. And then Friday, 11:30 a.m.
I call Emma Watson to discuss a possible partnership with her book club, Our Shared Shelf. Emma and I have known each other for a couple of years, and she's a huge inspiration to me and everyone at Bumble.
And the rest of it is just mind-numbingly boring inanity, really. I mean, the fact that the New York Times thought this was worth putting up actually doesn't surprise me. It's just interesting for me to learn that they've been going down the drain for a lot longer than I initially thought.
People don't talk enough about the misogynistic epidemic that we all live within.
Only a couple of months later, reports start circulating about the toxic, misogynistic work culture at Badoo. Simultaneous with Badoo's growth, it began earning a reputation for wild parties. We're talking nudity and drugs and group adult activities, new words that I had to Google and wish I sort of hadn't. There's even a private Facebook group where Badoo alumni would discuss these gatherings. And that's fine, okay, the employees love to work hard, play hard, I guess, but then you realize that all of these photos and videos taken at these parties were then circulated in the internal email system at the company. Now, by all accounts, Andreev himself wasn't involved in these parties or even in the email listserv, as they called it, but he did allow it, despite many new executives protesting. And he didn't end the practice until 2011. Andreev denies knowing about any of this. But more to the point of this video, what was concerning were the reviews and the complaints, rather, that were being made by several female employees about the workplace being hostile and discriminatory towards women. And in fact, it got so bad, especially on Glassdoor reviews apparently, that the head of HR, Anne Roberts, emailed London female employees vowing to get to the bottom of negative reviews on Glassdoor. Its subject was #TimesUp. So you know why they were taking action, because the whole climate was changing. I tried finding these reviews. It's been a long time since. I couldn't find any. In fact, one of the Glassdoor pages had a really high rating. So either things got really changed up and fixed since at Badoo, or someone's been doing a bit of cleanup. We'll never know, I guess. But even though we don't have access to these Glassdoor reviews, or at least I couldn't find them, a former employee by the name of Jessica Powell, who was Badoo's chief marketing officer from 2011 to 2012, had this to say in an email, and I believe it was an email to Forbes. Quote, "While serving as the company's CMO, I was told to act pretty for investors and make job candidates horny to work for Badoo. I was once even asked to give a designer candidate a massage. She says she refused to do so, adding that female employees were routinely discussed in terms of their appearance. When female staff spoke up, their concerns were ignored or minimized. You disagree with Andre? You were called a," I looked this up, apparently it's suka? I don't know, but it's basically Russian for bitch. Now, Forbes does point out that Jessica actually wrote a satirical novel based on her experiences at Badoo, and Andreev, in response to her allegations, says that this is just clever marketing to sell her book. So do with that what you may. While she's the only named source I could find in this expose, she certainly wasn't the only one. There are instances from 2018 of men inappropriately touching women. There are complaints of workplace bullying and harassment. In both cases, by the way, these men were allowed to come back to work after an investigation by an external HR firm that was hired by Badoo, although some measures were taken to separate the employees so that they wouldn't have to work with each other. There are even claims of internal engineering updates being named after porn stars and videos of employees engaged in sexual acts with prostitutes doing the rounds. And look, we do talk about many people who make false allegations on this channel, including Amber Heard, Meghan Markle, and other women. But when many female employees at the same workplace make various complaints at different time spans, it starts to become difficult to deny that there is a root problem. And more pertinent to the Meghan Markle debacle, you know how Meghan is very big on fighting racism, not just misogyny, there were allegations of racism made against Andreev as well. According to a former high-ranking executive, Andreev would complain when he saw too many dark faces on the app because he believed it lowered the value of the brand and made it look cheap. Something which, if true, because this is all hearsay and you do have to take all this with a grain of salt. But if this is all true, you really only have two options here. Either Whitney genuinely had no idea this was going on, which is plausible because Badoo was and still is in London, whereas Whitney's office is in Austin, Texas, or she knew and simply didn't care. Especially during the early days, the early months, I suppose, of Bumble's establishment, Whitney did spend a lot of time at Badoo. According to Forbes, she flew to London from Texas around 15 times just in the 4 months after she settled her lawsuit with Tinder, where she spent days walking around the streets of London with Andreev as they discussed their future plans. However, Whitney does tell Forbes that she never witnessed toxic behavior in the Badoo headquarters, and she stands firmly behind Andreev. Quote, "What I've seen firsthand from Andre is creative and motivating behavior. Andre has never been anything but kind and respectful to me. He's become my family and one of my best friends." I mean, sure, he's also responsible for her billionaire status, really. Because in November 2019, when he stepped down and sold his stakes in Bumble's parent company Magic Lab to Blackstone, part of that deal involved Whitney becoming CEO of Magic Lab. Soon after, the company went public, as we discussed in the podcast, and she became the youngest self-made female billionaire. So why would she not stand firm and defend him? However, playing devil's advocate, it is possible, we do know, that some people just don't show their ugly side. We know Meghan Markle does it. So many people came out in defense of her. George Clooney, back in the day, Oprah Winfrey, Gayle King, all these people who have only seen one side of Meghan, the nice side, the good side. And so it is possible that Andreev was on his best behavior whenever Whitney was around, especially since when they met, she had recently just sued Tinder for the exact same things that his company were being accused of. But at the same time, she did say that they're basically like best friends. They're like siblings. She calls him 5 to 10 times a day. She was in London a lot of the time. So one could argue it both ways. And Meghan could have explored this. She could have asked her about how this sat with her. Instead of talking about this experience, Whitney chose to talk about Meghan's face being plastered on magazines in Ireland. You just wonder what their intentions truly are, or perhaps you don't wonder. Because sometimes silence, as Meghan said in her Cut interview almost 3 years ago now, can be the loudest part of the song. I want to close off the video by stating that Whitney has given several different statements in response to this story. She gave one to TechCrunch, which is very long, but it's basically the same spiel. Didn't know what was happening. Everything I've experienced was nothing but positive and respectful. To this day, we at Bumble have never seen or heard of any of this behavior, etc., etc. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because Forbes actually responded and said the following, quote, "The responses are designed to obfuscate and deflect from the facts as borne out by the rigorous reporting. We stand by our reporting 100%. And it's worth noting that Forbes have not been sued for this expose, which again does speak volumes. So, in summary, we now know that a man was behind Whitney's success. Surprise, surprise. It's not like we didn't see that coming. And Whitney might potentially be a hypocrite, assuming she knew or had an inkling of the things that were happening in London.
Our Northern Star is, how do we end misogyny? Even if it means risking everything, even if the company had crashed, I would have been able to sleep at night because we had done the right thing.
Honestly, it's a 50-50 toss-up for me. She either knew and is a hypocrite or literally didn't know and couldn't even care less. But wow, what an incredible guest to start off a series about businesses being established by women. But it's not a coincidence that these women, the Meghans and the Whitneys of the world, find each other. You know that old saying, birds of a feather.